So last Sunday, we started a brand new series called 8:15. If you missed last week, I want to really encourage you to go back and pick up that message. I think it'll be a blessing to you and fill you in a little bit more on what we're talking about today. Now, we sort of kicked off that series by saying the entire month of October, we were really challenging all of our family and friends to do something. So how many of you, we asked you to set an alarm on your phone for 8:15. You could do it in the AM, you could do it in the PM, you could do it in both. But at 8:15, when that alarm went off, to just pray this prayer: God, I want to maximize my influence for your kingdom. I've got people in my life I want to draw toward Jesus. Help me to do it. Help my church to do it. You can pray that in any way that suits you, but we were doing it at 8:15. Let me do a quick survey, okay? How many of you, your alarm, you set it and you did it in the morning this last week? Would you raise your hand? In the morning? In the morning. Oh, there's a couple of us. All right, you can put your hands down. How many of you would say, I set mine in the evening? I am a night owl. I did mine in the evening. Would you raise your hands? Okay, we're going to be honest in the house of the Lord here. How many of you would say, I completely forgot, Pastor, and I didn't set any alarm at all? Okay, now's your chance, right? Take your phone out. If you have a pen, if you have a paper, if you don't have a phone, number one, we need to talk to you and move you into the 21st century and help you get that thing. But if you have a phone, set an alarm right now, 8:15. I put a little special ringtone to it. And it's a great little reminder all through October. Lord, maximize my influence for your kingdom. I've got people, and I want to draw them toward Jesus, all right? Last week, we started talking about influence. Dictionary defines that word like this: influence is the capacity to have an effect on the character, development, or behavior of someone or something. I know you've heard this by now if you've been with us, but influence is a water word. It's two Latin words, influere, a flowing in. So influence is like a current of water. When you have it, you are pulling people along your life's path. The stronger the current of your example, the more people are pulled with you. And we made a statement that became the title of our message last week, and I'm telling you, it's profound. It'll change your life. You have influence. I have influence. I'm not just talking about the capacity to have influence. Right now, you are pulling people somewhere. You're alive and you're on earth, so the words you speak and the things you do and the priorities you have and the places you shop and the church you attend or don't attend, all of those things, listen, you are pulling people in a direction with you. Every time you have a conversation with somebody, one of you is advising the other. We're all counselors. The most introverted person on earth, sociologists say, influences 10,000 people over a lifetime. You, my friend, you, my brother, you, my sister, are pulling people. We gave you a principle last week about influence that I really want to elaborate on today, and the principle is this: proximity increases pull. Influence is pull, and proximity increases pull. I saw a video, and I really wanted to show it this morning, but YouTube videos, it's a funky thing on kind of what you're allowed to do and how you do it and all that, so we couldn't do it. But if you want to look it up yourself, it's called Home and Trees Fall into the Mendenhall River. That's ever a weird title. But I found this, and literally, it was this Mendenhall River raging, flooding. And as it is raging along its path, it is literally, tragically, pulling these 3-story homes down into the river. And tree by tree, these great, epic, tall trees are falling and falling and falling one after another. And the principle there is proximity increases pull. It wasn't pulling down houses a block from there. It wasn't pulling down trees that weren't on its shoreline. The closer you were to the river, the more likely you got pulled in. I showed my daughter, like most men, destruction fascinates me, so I showed my daughter this video. And Aubrey, who is taking a physics class right now, said, well, yeah, Dad, that's Newton's law of universal gravitation. And I was like, I lost you at Newton. I like fig Newtons. That's about as far. I'm a preacher. I don't talk about physics. But she said, yeah, it's this idea that two objects of matter, the closer they are together, the more gravitational pull is exerted. Proximity increases pull. What is true in nature, what is true of a river, what is true of physics is also true in our relationships. The closer you are to somebody, the more influence you have on their life. I gave you this example last week of your life is like a theater. If you think of it this way, your life is like a theater. You got people in the balcony. You're not dealing with them a whole lot in life. It's very sporadic. It's very occasional, but they're still part of your life. You got people on the second row. You deal with them every once in a while. It's not all the time. It might not be weekly. You may not be communicating on a constant basis, but it's pretty regular. But all of us have people on the front row of our life. They have a front row seat because every week you're communicating with them. Maybe every day you're communicating with them. They might be your family members. They might be your close friends. They might be a neighbor. They might be somebody who cuts your hair. It might be somebody in your workplace. But we all have a front row. And here's the thing. Proximity increases pull. Proximity increases influence. Can I wager this morning that the people in your life who hurt you the worst were probably people from your front row? Can I wager this morning that the people who blessed you the most, that changed your life, were probably on your front row? There's a statistic that I have found absolutely true in my own ministry. I think everybody in here would echo this. 95% of people who come to Christ, 95%, now that's a statistic, came because of the direct influence of a friend or family member. Wow. If we go around the room and ask you how you came to Christ, it might have been because of a tract. It might have been because a stranger talked to you. It might have been because a preacher on television talked to you. But I'm telling you, you'll be the exception to the rule. 95% of us, somebody on our front row pulled us toward Jesus. This whole 8:15 thing, let me boil it down. Here's the question. What if we were to leverage this truth for the kingdom of God? What if instead of trying to come up with clever methods, what if we just understood that's my people predominantly and use that fact? What if we were to get intentional? I'm talking laser intentional about pulling our front row toward Jesus. I want to bring you a message this morning, and really this is the first step in getting intentional about the people God's already put in your life. And some of you got a million questions about this. We're going to hope to answer these all along the way, and if we don't, you'll have plenty of time to ask in a more private setting. I want to entitle our time together, the first step in maximizing your influence for Jesus, identify. Identify. Let me give you a few thoughts. Number one, there are approximately 8 to 15 people on your front row. There are approximately 8 to 15 people on your front row. And somebody by now, you're like, okay, what book did you read this in? Because, where's that in the Bible? What text are we going to use from that in the Bible? I am glad you asked. Mark chapter 4. Mark chapter 4 this morning. How many of you glad you came? Say amen. Mark chapter 4. We're going to begin in verse number 35, but before we get to that, let me set the scene. Jesus, during his 3.5 years of public ministry, mostly played in his home court, okay? And by that I mean mostly he preached in those Jewish sections around the Sea of Galilee. He never got real far from home. He spent his public ministry mostly in those areas where he'd grown up that were very, very familiar to him. His disciples knew those areas. They fished those areas before they came to follow him. These were Jewish crowds of people. So in the verses leading up to this text, Jesus is preaching to crowds of Jewish people, religious people, and the crowd is so big, he's out on a boat talking to them because there's like no room on the shore. It's going very well. And at the end of one of these things, he's giving some of the most profound known parables in the Bible in the verses preceding Mark chapter 4 and verse 35. And then Jesus does something. As the sun is setting, he tells his disciples some news that would have blown them out of the water, frankly. They didn't see this coming. Mark chapter 4, verse 35. On that day, when evening had come, Jesus said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." Now to us, it's like, oh, nice evening boat trip. They're going to go on an evening sail. That sounds amazing. To them, to the disciples, they were like, what? Jesus, it's going amazing over here. We're with our people. You want us to go there? Now, little did they know they were about to sail right into a storm, but they didn't know that yet. Why would they be so upset? Well, here's the thing. When Jesus said, let's go to the other side was known as the Decapolis. That in Greek meant 10 cities. There were 10 cities on the other side of the Sea of Galilee where Jews, like Jesus and his disciples, weren't welcome. Let me read you what one author said about the Decapolis. It is where the 7 nations of Canaan settled down when they were driven out of the promised land by Joshua. By the way, this stuff, let's pray for Israel, man. All this going on in the Middle East this morning. But if you know your history, back the 7-Day War and all of that, the animosity from people who believed they were driven out of their homes, okay? Literally, this was a crowd of people who'd been driven out of Canaan by Joshua. Now they're living in the Decapolis. Not only that, the region was filled with pagan cults that combined vile sexuality and extreme violence in their worship. Add on to that, it was also a center of Roman power. There was a legion of Roman soldiers stationed there, 6,000 of them. And guess what their moniker was? Guess what their logo was? The thing they flew on their flag. It was a boar's head. Jews aren't fond of pigs. They're unclean to them. Well, they worshiped pigs in the Decapolis. So I want you to get this. As one author said, it was everything that God-fearing people would not want to be associated with. For the disciples, the Decapolis wasn't just the wrong side of the tracks, author Tom Mercer said, it was the wrong side of life. And Jesus said, let's sail over there. Now I want you to go to chapter 5, and when they arrive, the welcoming committee that greets them is just one dude. And he is special. Look at chapter 5. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes, and when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, a demon. This man lived among the tombs. No one could bind him anymore. That means they'd tried a lot. Not even with a chain, for he'd often been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. By the way, Brian Anderson, one of our trustee meetings, we'd both seen the same movie, and he said, have you seen this preview that they're showing in the theaters, and now it's on TV for this new Exorcist movie? The most satanic thing imaginable. I mean, like, it comes on your TV, and you literally, we mute it and turn our heads. This is that. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran, and fell down before him. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, what have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me. Listen, Be careful about making Jesus that soft Jesus, that baby Jesus in a manger. I want you to understand this dude filled with devils gets on his face when Jesus shows up. For he was saying to him, Jesus was saying to the guy, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And Jesus asked him, "What's your name?" That always gives me some chills, man. Jesus, who knew this devil when he was an angel, said, "What's your name?" And the demon said, "My name is Legion, for we are many." You remember when I told you what a Roman legion was? 6,000 soldiers. I don't know how many demons were in this dude, but it wasn't a small amount. And he, the demon-possessed man, the demons inside of him, begged him, Jesus, earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now a great herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him, saying, "Send us into the pigs, let us enter them." Oh man, this is weird. I realize demons, it is always their desire to inhabit. It is always their desire to subdue. It is always their desire to take. I wonder how many of the things that we label psychological today, many of them are demons trying to get into a person's life and set up shop there and stay. They want something to inhabit. Verse 13, I don't fully understand this, but it's what the Bible says. So he, Jesus, gave them permission. And the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs. And this was so violent and so crazy and so thick with spiritual power. The herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned in the sea. They went insane. They'd been living in this dude. And when they hit 2,000 pigs, the pigs went berserk. The herdsmen fled. Yeah, I'll bet you did. And they told it in the city and in the country. And people came to see what it was that had happened. And they came to Jesus and they saw the formerly demon-possessed man, the one who'd had the legion, sitting there and clothed and in his right mind. And they were so excited for him. Yes. I don't want to be preaching on demons and that stuff happening. I'm going to promise you that. I will beat every one of y'all out the door, man. I'm just like, I'm big, but I'm fast when I'm scared. I promise you that. These people weren't excited about what Jesus had just done. They were scared. They were afraid. And they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. Hey, Jesus, as long as you're like a name and a figurehead, that's cool. But all this spiritual stuff, we don't really understand. Like, it's the same thing today, right? Everybody loves Jesus until you like bring him up at dinner. Everybody loves Jesus until you talk about anything he taught in the Bible. And then it's, you can keep all that. They began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. As he was getting into the boat, that part always gets me because they said, "We don't want you." And Jesus said, "Okay, I'll leave." The man who'd been possessed with demons begged him that he might be with him. Now stop a minute. This guy said, "Jesus, I've been being torn apart for all these years by these devils. And now you've healed me and now I'm whole. I want to go tell our story." Do you understand that we could do crusades all over the area? We could rent out amphitheaters and tell these people the story of what you did for me. We could have a massive influence if we just make the circuit and go public. And this is surprising. Verse 19. And Jesus did not permit him, but said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." We're not going to go out and start hitting up the strangers. We're not going to hit the crusade circuit. I want you to go home and tell your friends what I did for you. Now this is where, how many of you still tracking with me? Say amen. This is where it gets real interesting. Because the ESV translates this, go home and tell your friends. The NIV translates it, go home and tell your own people. The NLT translates it, go home and tell your family. So which one's right? Is he supposed to go tell his friends, or is he supposed to tell his people, or is he supposed to go tell his family? And the answer is, they're all right. Because a Greek word, the same Greek word used here to translate friends, people, and family is the Greek word oikos. And it means your extended household. This was your family. This was your extended family. This might be your servant, or in those days, your bondservant, your slaves. This might be neighbors that lived with you in that communal thing. This was your front row. Jesus said, I want you to go home and tell your front row. I want you to share your story with that approximately 8 to 15 people on the front row of your life that make up your relational world. Okay, before we go any further, somebody's like, well, okay, preacher, all right, I see that. That's cool. But that's one isolated incident. But it's not. When I started finding this in the Bible, it shocked me how often this shows up. Zacchaeus, remember? A wee little man, and a wee little man was he? When Zacchaeus got saved in Luke 19, Jesus said, he reflected on what had just happened. He said, today's salvation has come to this house, oikos. Zacchaeus, you didn't just get saved. Your whole front row is going to accept me because of what happened today. When Jesus healed the son of a royal official in John 4, he and his whole household, his whole oikos, believed. In Acts 10, Cornelius responded to the gospel presentation Peter had made. He and his whole household, oikos, became believers. I love the story in Philippi of Lydia and the city jailer. Remember that one? Both of whom responded to the Apostle Paul's challenge to place their faith in Jesus. And in Acts 16, it describes both, in both cases, their whole oikos believed and got baptized. I remember reading this as a kid, and I was like, I don't understand. The Philippian jailer's the one who got down on his knees and accepted Christ, and then it said his whole household got baptized. That's weird. I was never able to reconcile it. But here's the thing. That dude's front row who knew him and were close to him, when he got saved, they wanted to get saved. When he got baptized, they wanted to get baptized. Wow. Here's the thing. When the New Testament came to an end, the same tactical approach to world change, church history tells us, continued to gain momentum from one century to the next. Well, what is that approach? Dr. Rodney Stark, Baylor University, said this: mostly, the church spread as ordinary people accepted Christ and then shared it, the gospel, with their family and friends. And the faith was carried from one community to another in the same way, probably most often by regular travelers such as merchants. Look at that. Oh, wait a minute. I thought soul winning was all about strangers. I thought soul winning was all about big, giant crusades and colossal efforts. I thought soul winning was primarily about tracts. I'm not saying any of those things are wrong. Don't hear me wrong. Don't hear me knocking that. I'm saying the gospel has always had its most influence on the people in your front row. Always. Can I ask you a question today? You say, well, you're asking my neighbor the question. No, I'm asking you. No matter your gender, no matter your age, no matter your background, no matter your religious affiliation, no matter any of that, who is your oikos? Who is your extended household? Who are the 8 to 15 people seated on a front row of your life? By the way, you say 8 to 15, is that in the Bible? No. Yours might be less. You might have 6, you might have 7. It might be more. You might have 17. You might have 18. You understand we're given a general number about the people with a front row seat to your life. Here's what makes them them. You are communicating with them every day or every week. Tom Mercer, again. You're 8 to 15. I met him last week, by the way, and I can't wait to have him here and preach. The most humble guy. And he's written a lot on this idea of oikos, and I got to hear him and meet him in person. The greatest guy. Your 8 to 15, he writes, would include your family and close friends. Your oikos might include the clerk at the grocery store where you shop every week, the server you talk to at a favorite restaurant, or that person you keep running into every day at work. Our oikos comprises different kinds of people, all with different needs, but we all have one. Your oikos doesn't contain the same 8 to 15 people who make up mine, but it is that world, your world, that God wants to transform through the one common denominator they all share, you. Ooh, I like that, man. Man, I like that. Here's the second thought. It's not as long as the first thought. The first one is, you have 8 to 15 people on the front row of your life. So do I. Here's the second one. These 8 to 15 people are at all different stages of faith. Some of you are like, I don't have 8 to 15 people that don't know Christ. No, I don't either. Understand, we're talking about people in every different stage of faith on the front row of your life. Your front row is going to be diverse. And by the way, your theater is going to change constantly. My dad in 2007 was smack dab on my front row, and he left my theater altogether. He went home to be with Jesus. I got people who used to be in the balcony, man, and they're now on like row number 2 or 3 or on the front. I got people on the front who moved. They're not in my theater anymore. I got people on the front who are now in the balcony, or they're on row number 5. It changes, right? Let me give you a few subsets of some of the people you're going to find on your front row. You're going to find pre-Christians. I love the word pre-Christians. That's not original to me, because we're always like lost people. No, they're just pre-Christians. They're going to come to know Christ. They just haven't yet. Okay? You got some pre-Christians in your life. They don't even know it, but the Lord loves them, and He's after them, and they're going to come to know Jesus. They don't know Him yet, and what they need is to be evangelized. They need to find Christ. And you may be like, I don't have anybody on my front row like that. I think you do. But I think you're going to have to put these new glasses on and kind of think of, who is showing up in my life over and over again, even if we're not friends, every week, right? Some of you have somebody on your second row. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Okay, let me go on. Pre-Christians. Let me tell you who else is probably on your front row. Purposefuls. These are Christians that already know their purpose in life. They're already walking with Jesus. They might be more spiritually mature than you are, and they're on your front row, and it's awesome. Let me tell you what they need. They need to be encouraged. They need to be encouraged. You're in their life for a lot of reasons, but one of them is to pour courage into those people because they're blessing you in the world just by being who they are and living for Jesus. There's a third category. How about prodigals? Most of us have somebody on our front row. They know Jesus, but they have wandered, haven't they? They used to be in church. They're not anymore. They used to read their Bible. They don't anymore. They used to pray and have a positive impression of Jesus, but life hurt them, and they have wandered. You know what they need? They need to be energized. They need God to refuel them and give them back their vision and give them back their purpose and heal their wounded heart. But some of them are on your front row. Okay, here's 4. Some of yours on your front row are potentials. Potentials. They're not on your front row, they're on your second row. But maybe they need to be engaged and kind of moved onto your front row. That's about the only ones that I'm really going to talk a lot about that, because most of this is not, it's not choosing people, it's just identifying people, right? This may be the one exception. There's somebody on your second row. Here's the deal. You cook and they like to cook. You quilt, and they like to quilt. You golf or fish or hunt, and they like to golf or fish or hunt. And they're right on your second row, and they just need a little bump for you to have more of a relationship with them. Again, if you think what I'm saying is, you invite them on a hunting trip, and when they're all sewed up in their sleeping bag and can't get away, you share Jesus with them. If you think that's what I'm talking about, I don't think you know me very well, right? I hate that. I despise that. Right? Go to your restaurant this afternoon and just bump into somebody's table and ask them who they voted for in the last election. And get ready for a fist fight, probably. You have no right to do that. You don't know them. They don't know you. I'm not saying Jesus won't ever lead you to talk to the guy while he's zipped up in his sleeping bag. But I'm going to tell you, most of the time he won't. It's going to take some time. It's going to be more organic than that, right? But there's some people, listen, some of you, your kid plays soccer and their kid plays soccer. Your kid plays football and their kid plays football. And they've always been 3 bleachers over, but with just a nudge, they'd be on your front row. Do you see what I'm talking about? We're just identifying these people. You're like, I don't know where to look. You don't just look at what God's already done. You're not choosing them, you're just noting who God's already put there. Let me give you the third and last point. We all have 8 to 15 people on our front row. They're in various stages of faith. These 8 to 15 people are your first best mission field. Why do you say that, Brian? Because proximity increases pull. They see you. They know you. And by the way, that's what scares us, right? They know me. And like I've been at work and sometimes I got mad and I said the wrong thing. They're in my family and man, I was kind of a jerk back then, right? I wish, I don't think people are looking for perfection. I think perfection drives people away. I think they're looking for authenticity. I think they're looking for you to be real about the fact that you're a human being who's struggling, but you found something marvelous in Jesus. These 8 to 15 people are your first best mission field. Somebody, you may be here today, okay, and you're like, Brian, we go into the highways and we go into the byways and we compel them. We go out and we knock doors, or we do tracts, or we do crusades, or we go, we don't, all this, we go, right? Can I just note something, the Great Commission? Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. You understand that go is in the present tense in Greek, as you are going. I'm not saying that he won't call you to do something confrontational. He might. I'm saying he is calling you to deal with the people that you are dealing with every day in life. This isn't original to me, but I like it. If you feel that your job is to witness to everybody, you probably aren't witnessing to anybody. If you feel or were taught that your job is to witness to everybody, you probably aren't witnessing to anybody. But your job isn't to witness to the whole world, just like your job is not to run the whole church if you're in leadership or exercise every spiritual gift on the list of spiritual gifts. Your job is not even to necessarily look for somebody to witness to. Granted, we represent Christ to everybody we come in contact with. Some of the best times in our life are those spontaneous moments when we make a spiritual difference in the life of somebody we didn't know before. But for most of us, those moments are rare, and for good reason. Listen, our primary responsibility is simply to be prepared to minister God's grace to those groups of people He's already directed us to. It's simple and it's efficient. You may be here today and watching online, or you're here in the place and you'd say, Brian, I want to have a spiritual influence on the people in my life. I know I'm going to pull people somewhere. I believe that. I want to pull the people on my front row toward Jesus. Then I want to challenge you, friend, to get intentional about it. To get intentional about it. Where's Beth at? Beth Felton. Beth, stand up, would you? Beth is wearing today a jersey from the finest, most frustrating football team and the all-time rushing leader, say his name with me, Emmitt Smith. If you got that wrong, you're out. Emmitt Smith, she wore that today as a prime example. She literally is my illustration. Emmitt Smith said, the greatest rusher of all time, and he learned this when he was just a kid. It's just a dream until you write it down. It's just a dream until you write it down. Do you know he wrote that he wanted to be the all-time rushing leader when he was a kid? And he looked at it, and he trained for it, and he worked at it, and he put it on his wall, and it was in front of him. It is only a dream till you write it down. Don't we write down everything in our life that's important? We write down grocery lists because I know if I get home and I didn't buy that one thing, Jenny's going to be mad at me. We write down real goals. We write down real lists when we go on vacation and we want to pack everything important to us we write down. Why in the world wouldn't we get intentional about identifying who these people on our front row actually are? We usually end this time with what we call behind the scenes the invitation moment, because we never want to walk out of here with just giving you truth and saying, all right, God bless you. There's always a choice to be made. There's always, will I use this truth? Will I do something with it? Faith isn't faith till you do something. So we always challenge you, and we usually set it to music, and we usually have you stand, and we usually have a moment of prayer. And I want to make it even simpler today. I'm challenging you. And for some of you, it makes you a little uncomfortable. Because maybe, Calvary, you're not all the way in yet, and you don't quite know everybody yet. Or maybe you're really introverted, and so going to anything like this is like, I don't know, what are they going to make me do? This is going to be weird. It makes me nervous. For some of you, your Christianity right now is really comfortable. Can I just say something? I love you. If your Christianity isn't making you a little uncomfortable somewhere, it should be. It's never been meant to be completely comfortable, ever. So I want to challenge you. Here's what we're going to do here in a couple of minutes. We're going to dismiss to areas all over this campus, and we're going to actually have Raising Cane's lunch, boxes of lunch for you, okay? And we're going to have it to where you can grab a lunch. We're going to have different areas based on Sunday school class, some based on if you're here and you don't have a grouping, some of y'all are going to come with somebody else. We're going to go and have lunch together when this concludes. And then we're going to have a quick session. We're going to pass out some cards like this and literally quickly go through these and have a chance. You're not having to show it off to everybody. You're not having to compare notes to everybody. But we're going to get intentional about, here are my people. We're going to get intentional about writing it down. It may be on the piece of paper we gave you. You may just use that as a template to write it down on your phone like I've done. Or maybe to write it on another piece of paper. But what if we didn't just talk about it today, y'all? We did it. We got intentional about writing this list. You're like, well, that could last all day. We're going to have you out of here by 1:15, 1:30 at the absolute latest. I think most of you it'll be 1:15, okay? I want to challenge you to do this first step with us and identify the people. That's all we're going to mess with today. Just who are the people on my front row? And I'm going to literally write them down. So what happened to the demon-possessed guy? What happened with Jesus? Remember, that community said, Jesus, we're not into you. We're afraid of you. You need to go. But this guy said, Jesus, let's go do this thing together. I want to travel with you. I want to do crusades with you. Let's go public. And Jesus said, no. I want you to go home to your oikos. Tell your front row what all I've done for you. And Jesus sails away. What happened? If you want to look one more time with me, Mark chapter 5, verse 20. I can read it to you if you don't want to turn. Matthew 5:20. And that formerly demon-possessed man went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. He went home where he lived and told everybody what Jesus had done for him, and everyone marveled. Now wait a minute. They were afraid of Jesus, but they were amazed at this guy that they knew so well and what was happening in his life. Fast forward, Jesus didn't go back to the Decapolis for a while, and I think all of his disciples were like, thank God, we're not sailing across to these people, especially that crazy man. But when he did come back, this is what he found in Matthew 15. And great crowds came to him, bringing with them the lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others. And they put them at his feet, and he healed them, so that the crowd wondered when they saw the mute speaking, the crippled healthy, the lame walking, and the blind seeing. And they, the people in the Decapolis, glorified the God of Israel. What happened? One man happened who went home and told his front row what Jesus had done for him. And a lot of them went and told their front row what Jesus had done for that guy and what he'd done by extension for them. And that exponential thing changed the world. You got a front row. I got a front row. Let's identify them.